Hello, welcome to my endgame build for Drova. Now, before starting to the stats and my build per se, I just want to say that in case you're wondering why did I go the axe, which is in my opinion the best one, because of the AoE and the attack range radius. Plus, if you charge your attack, it's actually pretty easy to use. Your charged attack will just be sitting here and calculating about 1 second before the enemy gets into your range. You'll not really be using the third attack. It's kind of hard to pull off the combos because you need a timing attack, so that's why you mostly will hit, dodge, hit, and so on. So much more easier to use AoE, lot of damage. Plus, if you just compare the basic items, just compare a little bit the damage of the basic items. So you can get at 35 proficiency a 37 damage axe, or let's say 43. Dodge will be 28 or 26. The spear as well. The spears, this is a little harder to get. Here 25 or 23. As you can see, the damage between them is more or less the same at a certain level, but in the beginning, yeah, the swords don't really have the damage and the spears don't really have the damage either. Daggers, oh, the daggers are very easy to use against certain enemies, but most of the times you're not fighting a single enemy, so that's why I didn't like them. You can see you have to be super close to your enemy, and yeah, you have to probably dodge, go behind them, and then do 3 or 4 or 5 attacks. It can be easier to stack the stance damage, but it's not really that useful in the long run. If I was to play the game again, I'd probably go with the spear and a slingshot build, because you have all of the best capabilities of all the weapons, basically. You can use this to run away or just to charge at your enemy and then dodge back, which is massive, and then you dodge back, and then you also use the slingshot, which can deal a lot of damage. As you can see, the endgame stuff will be the silver stuff. Silver arrow or silver balls. Yeah, that's what I would choose if I was to replay the game again. Not going to happen, it's too much work to get to the endgame. And the bow, well, the bow is kind of interesting, but it's not really enough for me in my opinion, because you need to manage your arrows and you need to find much better bow at some point, and besides, you'll fight so many enemies at some point that will really be upset about chasing the enemies and just using your bow in such a way, to the point where it's not really worth it, because there are just too many enemies on the screen most of the times. I also don't like to use the swords because you need to buy a shield, and the shields are quite expensive if you want to buy them, otherwise you'll have to run around all over the map, and you'll also be running away from enemies that will be flanking you. So yeah, ultimately the axe is the better choice from all over the options. A spear and slingshot will also be a very close second. You also have enough AoE to hit a lot of enemies. Okay, now let's go into the build itself. What will you choose? Well, for the majority of the game, you'll probably play with the banded heavy armor. It will give you a critical chance of 10%, and then you'll just switch to the bygone armor, which will give you a lot of stats. So as you can see, I have the heavy one. Executioner gives you a lot of damage as well. And then as for my items, well, ultimately I went with this one, Dorian's Heirloom, just because you can focus better, focus your focus. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Basically, you want to hit enemies and not really do anything else, because we have also 2 other rings that will help us with health regeneration. If you lose health, you can recover it by just hitting the enemy. If you kill an enemy, you get 5% health back. So I use most of my Mandragora potions to increase my max health. You really not go anything near 200 health like I did if you don't use your Mandragora potions and some of your other stuff. So yeah, it kind of depends on your build, but as you can see, I'm just here to hit enemies with my axe, and that's it. And the blessing of the Divinity is just too good to not use. It will also give you 15 proficiency or prowess to equip your better weapons. So this is kind of like it, but I also want to discuss a little bit about the other trinkets that we'll be using, because this is the endgame build. But if I was to change something, I would replace some of the health potions I used with focus potions, because you really want to have 40 focus at least, so you can cast the shouts. It will be the fervent one and the battle shout. Now I'll not get into details, but 50% movement speed plus the movement speed from sleeping plus the movement speed from the food will really be useful to finish the game faster and not waste hours and hours just traveling around the map. that would be a good thing as well. But there is a catch. If you don't build your character like this, or if you don't reach this high level, you can also get 40 focus to travel around pretty easy. You just have to use the bonded armor, which will give you 6 base focus. There might be a better trinket that gives you base focus, but you'll probably get the Amulet of the Augment Spirit. I think you can buy it from the bonded faction as well. So 6 and 6, that will be 12. So you can get away with just having 28 focus. And then you can either just eat the fruits, equip these items, or whatever you like. But most of the times, if you have cleared the map already, it's just better to use these two items, 28 focus, and just travel around with all of the shouts activated and the misty steps, and you'll have a much easier time playing the game. Let's go over the other options as well, and why I didn't choose them. Belt of the Master. Yeah, you don't really use the final hit of the combo, because they mean the final free hit of the combo. I'm not sure if they allow you to do this with only having 2 moves in the combo. It's not very clear how it's done, and I don't know, maybe this... and it's only for a sword and an axe. Maybe this should be explained a little better. They should make it clear if it's the third hit of the combo or the second hit if you don't have the third one. Yeah, either way, it will not really be worth it because you don't really hit that much. I mean, the enemies have to be sitting still to use this one. Like I said, I like this one because it makes you a lot more tanky and goes very well with my build. Plus, we'll never get stunned except for some skills. Well, Bolt of Grandeur, we don't really have a range build. Wind Talisman, this is a bit tricky to use because it doesn't say over here, but the buff is only available for a second or so. So you dodge and then you have a very limited amount of time to use the attack. So it's actually very limited, and most of the times you avoid an enemy to not get hit, not dodge and hit an enemy. I like that one. This can also be very good. So as you can see, you can pair them to basically dodge and then use a focus ability and then use another attack, which will give you a massive amount of damage for a single hit, but at the same time you can just use a focus ability that does the damage. It's very tricky to use something like this, so I don't like it. Heart of the Sprika is very good, but sadly you get it so late into the game to the point where you will not really use it. But if you could get it earlier in the game, it would have been useful against certain groups of enemies or just bigger opponents sometimes. Horny Fetish, yeah, it's not very good, but again, it's for the mages, for the mage builds, but you also need to have one of these things to make use of it, otherwise you'll find that you might die by using a spell. Plus, it's not very useful against a lot of enemies. I guess it's only useful against a lot of enemies if you have this Opulent Berserker Ring and if you use AoE abilities, but at that point you probably just will finish the game anyway, doesn't matter. Horny Cestus could be an option, but it's more or less a fun item, especially when you're in certain situations. But in the beginning of the game, you might find that only scripting with your fist is actually a lot more damage than your weapon, so definitely has a lot of uses in the beginning of the game. But for Amulet, well, it's not really that good because you have a 10% chance, let's say, to inflict a critical hit to make the bleeding active, and then you just have a very small chance to recover health. You can also use some traps, but then again you're using consumables you never get back, so it's very niche. Could work in the beginning, but it's not really worth it. Tinkerer Revenge. Yes, I think this is one of the best items in the game and you'll be using it probably 50%. Plus you can use your bombs, your knives and other trinkets and traps to just kill a lot of the bigger enemies very fast. Definitely useful against the golems or bears or anything that is a challenge to you. Even against the bandits that protect the heavy bandit armor, super useful. Then we just have some of these things which not really that useful. Bleed effects inflict their damage faster. This was one of the items that I used a lot in the beginning of the game because of the bandit armor that we had a lot of bleedings. Plus the knives. The knives can also be used to a very high degree with stuff like this, with the bleed effects, and just kill enemies faster. It's great. Not really useful unless you're a mage or an archer, mostly an archer. Talk about that one. Skull Cleaver is not really that useful because 25% more stance damage just means you might not hit the enemy another time, or maybe you will stun an enemy with 2 less hits, but at the same time you don't really use it that much in the beginning of the game because unless you have very low damage weapons, this is not going to work. So yeah, very little effects in the later parts of the game as well, when you just have a lot of damage and you don't really need more. Horn of the Hunter, useful for bow builds, talisman, ruby talisman. This is what you should use when you're traveling around with the focus and the shouts. Very good. Doesn't add a lot of time though, just adds a few more seconds to their effect, so definitely very niche and only for moving around. And then you just have a lot of other stuff. You also have some trinkets that increase your armor by a lot, and I recommend you use those in the beginning of the game, and you can buy them from the bonded faction. I don't have them because I didn't think it was useful to buy them. And the rings that increase your stats, they can be very good, but most of the time you'll not really get a chance to use them or properly use them. For example, the Iron Triskelion, I think there is a better version that gives you more, but they nerfed the Triskelions because you can just buy the Triskelions in the beginning of the game and then just have a very easy game. Also, I think you have to start with the Ring of the Norns in order to get 3 of them in order to craft the ring that gives you 20 HP, and that will really be worth it in the beginning of the game, having an extra 20 HP, massive. Okay, now let's go over the stats and the talents and stuff like this. Now, if you want to play the game, you'll probably notice that you need body to upgrade to the final level. So now I'll be talking about my build in particular, so the Axe build. You'll get Blood Frenzy, which is really worth it because you can use it multiple times. 25% extra damage plus the third combo attack, but it's not, again, you're not going to be using the third combo that much. A lot more damage. I like it how it's basically more damage, and then you have these things over here. Heavy attacks consume less stamina, which is really useful. I recommend you get this as fast as possible for the axes, otherwise you'll feel like you're not really doing a lot of damage with a single swing because you don't have the movement or the attack speed to kind of use them a lot. The grass. So if you break their stance, you'll automatically hit them with the critical stats, the critical hit. And that's why, like I said, the Skull Cleaver can be very useful in the beginning of the game when you can actually use them, but later on you just kill enemies normally with your talents and stuff like this. So yeah, just make sure you understand why you use certain trinkets at certain points of the game and not later. And the attacks generate additional focus, so that's why I like it, because it's so much easier to activate your abilities with the axes because you just gain more focus. And for the sword, let's say over here, it's kind of harder to use, and as you can see, you'll need... Yeah, it's not really worth it because you need to use spells and swords together. The spear, to attack on the same opponent, increase the generate focus one, is not that good because, guess what, you'll be killing your enemies pretty fast, so it doesn't matter unless you're fighting a boss, but at the same time, this is per hit, this is against the same opponent, so I guess it will reset if you hit another enemy. And the daggers, after using an ability to gain 10 focus. Well, might be useful to spam abilities, but it's just annoying to spam the abilities overall. So yeah, not really that useful. Also, my stats. Why did I go with these stats? Technically, you should only invest in your strength. A lot of people will tell you there's no point investing in the dexterity at all, but this is where I kind of disagree. So, when you're using the bandit armor, you'll always have 10% critical chance. So that's going to be great and amazing, but at some point you'll just swap your armor with the Bygone armor, so that means you should probably invest in dexterity as well. So invest everything you can in strength, and when you kind of reach the end game and you want to switch to the armor of Bygones, just put more dexterity because you really want to inflict critical hits which will inflict bleeding, which does a lot of damage. Plus, because of the other effects, you'll like it more. Plus, remember, bleeding does damage to enemies that are running away, so if you inflict bleeding on an enemy, and if he doesn't want to attack back, you'll still be inflicting the bleed. I just like to kill enemies straight up, so you probably will hear a lot of players just invest everything into strength, but at some point strength is not really that good because you don't really get much back from it. Doesn't matter if you inflict 20% more damage because you'll still kill the enemy with the same amount of hits. So yeah, at some point you just have to switch from strength to dexterity. As for the mind, well, I don't recommend you invest anything in mind unless you plan to use it. As you can see, this will also increase your base focus, so there are a few ways to get to 40 focus using your armor, your trinkets, or just by eating food or whatever. Consumables, you have potions and food like the turnips or the spring blossoms. Or additionally, you can just go there by just investing all of your points into mind, or most of your points into mind. example, now I can invest my learning points into mine. I'm not sure how much I'll get in focus, but doesn't really matter that much. Also, let's speak about the other stuff that will help you be much better in combat. Additionally, you probably know about the permanent stat items, and you can just eat them as they are raw, or you can just wait until you get the mandragora to make the potions. Let's speak about the foods. One of the best foods you can have in the game is the farmer meal because of the movement speed. Movement speed is not just useful to wander around the map, it's also useful to dodge attacks because if you can run away from an enemy, it cannot attack you. That sounds decent, right? Yeah. So most of the times you'll just be able to run circles around an enemy and you will not get attacked, which is kind of overpowered, and the developer should think a little bit about it, maybe give the monster some extra abilities. Agility is also very good because you get 10% max health, especially in the beginning of the game. This is huge because it will allow you to actually take a few more hits. And then the next one will probably be Tia's marinated meat chunk. So as you can see, this is just a crit chance of 3%. It's not a lot, but with the banded heavy armor or your dexterity, it can add up to quite a lot. So you can even make a crit build like this. But it's hard to give up the farmer meal or the stew for the extra damage, so top 3 most useful foods. And as for the potions, most of them don't really do anything, but helping focus with health is too dangerous in my opinion, and you'll only be able to use it in the endgame, so it doesn't really matter that much. There's the golem ointment, which will increase your physical damage resistance by 40%. You take more damage from magic, but magic is only from golems or the Drova, so it doesn't really matter that much. So for the majority of the game, you can use the golem ointments against stuff like bears or other creatures. I think harpies also do magic damage, so you can have to choose your targets, but most of the times you'll just want to use the golem ointments against bigger groups of enemies. That's really helpful. Other than that, I think we have the harpy brew. We also have a potion that will give you more movement speed. Again, I think I said as before, wander around the map or exploring or stuff like this. This is great because it will let you just fly over the map with all of the improvements that I mentioned. So don't be afraid to use this also in combat. So these are the 2 most useful potions or consumables you can use in combat. Otherwise, you'll most of the time heal with the dark brew, the bygone herbs, or the red shroom tincture. So try to get the recipes for these 2 very early if you can, and use them to create these things only. And then just save your bygone herbs for, the tougher combats of the game. And that's kind of it. That's kind of all I wanted to say about the endgame builds. My endgame builds, talents, the stuff, the X. Okay. I shouldn't have drunken that. Shouldn't have drunk that. So we're over here in the north, and we'll try to kill a Leshy. I think that's the name for it. I also switched from the Iron Man mode to normal mode because I want to do a lot of other stuff. So can we brute force it? More or less, we can brute force it. And you're supposed to break its stance while it's using the spell attack on you. Okay. The head of a Leshen, so it's not Leshy, it's Leshen. You get a lot of sap, you get the garden roots, you get essence of the forest, which I'm not sure what it's used for. I have to check some of the recipes, and the head is 200. So yeah, endgame builds are overpowered. Next time, bye bye.